I'm going to be demonstrating a sort of a semi-abstract painting, sort of a little bit of a landscape with some bluebells. So it's kind of like beautiful flowers with a beautiful abstract background. So I'm really excited about it. I'm excited to show you the techniques and the things that you can do to get quite a nice result in a painting. It's a lovely way to free up a little bit of way of losing yourself in a painting, because when you start a watercolor painting or any other painting for that matter, you totally forget about everything else. So I'd love to take you along this journey and hopefully you really enjoy it. But I will try and explain my process. It is a process. There's no sort of, I mean, there are rules to watercolor, but they're there to be broken as well. If you've got any questions about the techniques I'm using or any of the materials, please put them in the comments section below and I'll try and get back to you as soon as I can. So let's get started. So here's my watercolor paper. I've taped down the edge with some framing tape and I've masked out all the bluebells. I'm wetting the paper now just with clean water in the background, just giving it a good soak with a very large brush. I'm going to be mixing up some background colours now. You can see some sort of yellowy background, so I'm going to put that in first, but I want to keep a lot of the light in the middle of the background there, so I'm avoiding painting in that area. But you'll find that the paint will drift over there, but you need to leave a big gap so you don't lose the light. And what I've done here as well, just in case you might have that problem, is I've actually sprayed it with some water. Now I'm tilting the paint away from that light area and using a nice big flat wide brush to pull that paint down and tilt it down and away from the light. I'm mixing up now sort of a yummy dark colour, sort of a green and a bit of touch of pink. And I'm just putting that damp into damp now into the background. Just, you know, it's not too dark, those trees behind, but you want to keep it sort of quite pale because it is the distance. Mixing a juicy dark now. It's Payne's grey with some violet and some blues and some yellows. It's just rich and it's creamy. I just want to put that little bit of dark on the right hand side. You'll find with watercolors you put the darks in and then they fade off a little bit, so don't be afraid of the dark, as it were. I'm tilting that in so it blends in a little bit and using my spritzer bottle just to get the paint moving because it was sitting up too much. It was drying off a little bit. So this is just to encourage it to blend more. And I'm now mixing up a creamy limey green just to put these in the foreground. You'll find those bluebell leaves and grasses around bluebells. They're beautiful against that lovely violety blue of the bluebells. So I'm trying to get that in. I'm using the bottom of my brush here just to create some soft grasses and tree trunks. And I'm just finishing off filling in some of the lighter grasses here. Mixing up a little bit of a darker green, painting damp into damp. Mixing some cerulean here, slightly thicker, just pushing that darker paint at the bottom. Little bit of the phthalo blue, little bit of grey, little bit of cerulean, really to make a creamy dark here. And I'm painting damp into damp, just in the corner. Over all of that masking fluid, so it'll really bring out the light stems and flowers, so you get like a dark against light. And these are my stars of the show area here, and doing the same on the right hand side. Just continuing with the darks now, and I'm using my trusty apple twig that I've sharpened with a pencil sharpener just to put the long thin grasses in. I really like the texture it makes. It kind of makes marks in the paper, and you know, gives me that sort of feeling I'm using a pencil, but actually it's moving the paint around and creating darks, lovely thin darks where I need them. I'm continually to tilt this to get the paint moving, because I want all the background to be quite fuzzy and out of focus. Just an important point here, I'm just spraying off some of the paint that was coming into the edge of the painting there. It's really important to wipe that all away, because sometimes you're really pleased with your painting and sometimes that paint can creep back if you don't deal with it with a kitchen towel. So remember to mop up. Finally, I'm just sprinkling on some salt just to create some texture, and that will pull off the paint and soak it up. And when it's dry, it creates this lovely texture. The only thing I would say is I would have liked more texture, but sometimes salt can be very unpredictable. The other thing you can see, I've taken off the masking fluid as well. So here's the exciting bit. I'm mixing up some Bluebell colours. I'm using Ultramarine, Opera Rose, and some Ultramarine Violet as well. I love making Bluebell colours like a sort of a bluey, purpley colour with touches of pink here and there. So I'm just mixing up a few little puddles here. So I've got the paint when I start painting. I don't have to keep mixing all the time. So it's quite nice to be nice and prepared.
So mixing up pink and blue to make a lovely sort of blue violet for the bluebells here. So you can vary the colours, adding a little bit maybe more pink, maybe a little bit more blue, to create variety and colour on the bluebells.
What I'm doing here is I'm actually wetting the bluebells with clean water before I apply the paint, because I'd like it to be sort of fuzzy and wet in wet. So as you can see here, it's the sort of more violet-y colour. So I'm just putting that in wet. So my process here is to wet the bluebells, a few of them, and then add some paint as I go along. Don't wet all the bluebells, because by the time you get to that back to the beginning, it would have dried. So just wet as many as you can, sort of the speed you can go at, and just let it bleed. So you're keeping a little bit of the white edges there as well, and it's like the light's catching the edge of the bluebell.
So again, wetting the bluebell with clean water to enable me to work wet in wet. So you may want to just wet a couple at a time, because sometimes the painting can dry quickly. So just judge about how warm or cool your room is to how many bluebells you'll wet before you start painting. So I'm just dropping in the paints here, wet into wet. Again, vary the colours. So you might want to add a pinch more blue or a pinch more pink to make a sort of pink violet or blue violet, or just an in-between violet. And I'm going to mix up a slightly thicker colour, so less water, more paint, and just dropping that in damp into wet there, sort of at the sort of bottom of each of the flowers. Wetting the right hand bluebells here with clean water. I'm going to do the same, dropping in the colour wet into wet.
What I'm doing now is I'm just putting richer paint in. It's slightly thicker, slightly darker, so it just shows a little bit of the darks and creates a bit of variety of colour in the bluebells as well. But you can see they're singing against the background. They really sort of pop out against that lovely luscious greens. So I'm really pleased with that. And I'm painting this obviously wet in wet, so the colours blend in as well nicely. I'm just creating a little bit of dark paint now to paint the stems and the grasses.
So working my way down, just simply painting wet on dry here, using the tip of the brush. Again, you can vary the colours, and you can add a little bit more of a greeny colour, maybe a touch of the violet in there as well, just to make it more interesting. I've actually added a little bit of yellow here as well. You can use yellow ochre just to add some warmth and interest to those stems. I'm just adding a few darks and details here and there to the bluebells, wet on dry, just using a darker blue violet. I thought it'd be quite nice just to add a few more grasses here on the right hand side, here and there, just going towards the centre, just to add a bit of interest and detail to bring that foreground forward.
What I'm attempting to do here is just putting on darks and details. So I'm putting little darks into the sort of centres of the bluebells, and I put in dark grasses as well, just to create those details. So I'm sort of nearing the end of the painting now. The only thing I've found here, and I'm making up a really limey green, is I feel the foreground is a little bit too dark. So I'm attempting here to put some lighter grasses in here, just to give that foreground a little bit of balance and some light areas of paint.
So you want to use quite creamy paint as well, working wet on dry here, and try to vary the sort of direction of the grasses as well. So mixing up a lovely delicious violet here, using the pink, the ultramarine.
You can always tell when I'm getting near to the end of a painting because I always have to have a little spatter. It stops me from sort of messing about and putting too much detail in. So I've spattered the Bluebell colour. I've actually added a little bit of white to it now just to create a lighter colour. I quite like that colour, Bluebell colour mixed with white. It's a really pretty pastel shade. So I'm just using my hand to cover up the light area in the sky, but you could also use a piece of paper or something like that to make sure you don't get any Bluebell spots in your sky. So this is the final bit of the painting now. I've removed the masking tape. As you can see, there's a lovely white border. I love to use a mount as well to get a different perspective. It's a really good tool, especially when you've come to the end of the painting, to see if you need to do any more work.
But I think I'll leave it there for now. If you enjoyed this tutorial and you would like to support the content that I create here on YouTube, why not think about joining my Patreon membership? You will get access to my exclusive tutorials and downloadable outline sketches, and you can cancel anytime. Details about the membership can be found in the description below. Just click Patreon. Thank you so much for watching. Happy painting. Bye for now.